Imagine standing at the edge of a river so wide you cannot see the opposite bank. The current is loud. The water is freezing. There are no bridges, no boats waiting on the shore, no roads, no maps, just moving water stretching into the distance. Now imagine one more thing. Behind you, food is disappearing. The seasons are changing. Predators are moving into your hunting grounds. Staying where you are could mean starvation. Crossing the river might mean death. Not crossing it might guarantee it. Today, you can cross most rivers in minutes. A bridge, a ferry, or even a satellite map on your phone turns a dangerous barrier into a minor inconvenience. For ancient humans, rivers were different. Some stretched for hundreds of meters. Others flooded unpredictably. A calm stream in the morning could become a violent torrent by sunset. And yet, somehow, your ancestors crossed them. Not once. Thousands of times. Without steel, without engines, without written language. In fact, some of the greatest migrations in human history would have been impossible unless prehistoric people repeatedly crossed rivers that modern hikers would hesitate to enter. That changes something fundamental about how you picture ancient humans. They were not simply wandering across empty landscapes. They were solving engineering problems, long before engineering had a name. The story begins nearly 2 million years ago. Around 1.8 million years ago, a human relative known as Homo erectus began spreading out of Africa. Fossils discovered at Dmanisi, in modern-day Georgia, show that these early humans traveled thousands of kilometers across unfamiliar environments. They encountered forests, mountains, deserts, and rivers, lots of them. The route from eastern Africa into western Asia crossed major river systems, including branches connected to the ancient Nile, Jordan, Euphrates, and many seasonal waterways that looked nothing like today's landscapes. Those rivers were not optional obstacles. They stood directly between humans and the next source of food. For decades, archaeologists assumed early humans simply waited until rivers became shallow. Sometimes they probably did, but waiting wasn't always possible. Climate records show that during the Pleistocene epoch, which began about 2.58 million years ago, rainfall patterns changed constantly. Rivers expanded and shrank over decades, sometimes even within a single season. Waiting for perfect conditions could mean missing animal migrations or watching edible plants disappear. So ancient humans adapted. Evidence from stone tool sites across East Africa, including Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, suggests that early hunting groups followed migrating animals over enormous distances. Those animals didn't stop at rivers, neither did the humans following them. But here's where it gets stranger. Crossing a river is not just about getting wet. It's about understanding something invisible. Current. Modern swimmers often underestimate moving water. A current flowing at only 1 meter per second can generate enough force to knock an adult off balance in knee-deep water. Many rivers move even faster. Without experience, stepping into one could mean being swept away within seconds. Ancient humans had no physics textbooks, but they had observation. Generation after generation, they watched branches drift downstream. They saw where animals crossed safely. They learned which bends slowed the current and where gravel bars emerged during dry seasons. This wasn't instinct. It was accumulated knowledge. Knowledge passed through families long before writing existed. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have found that environmental knowledge is often taught from childhood through repeated observation rather than formal instruction. Children learn by watching. Adults remember because forgetting has consequences. The same pattern almost certainly shaped prehistoric life. Every safe crossing became part of a mental map, not a map drawn on paper, a map carried in memory. One successful crossing could feed a family. One mistake could erase an entire generation. And rivers weren't only dangerous because of the current, they were alive. Around 2 million years ago, Africa's waterways were home to massive crocodiles, hippopotamuses, and other predators. A modern Nile crocodile can exceed 5 meters in length and weigh more than 700 kilograms. Fossil evidence suggests some prehistoric crocodilians were even larger. Crossing slowly wasn't just exhausting, it made you vulnerable. Researchers studying predator behavior have noticed something remarkable. Large animals often cross rivers together, not because it's easier to swim, but because numbers reduce individual risk. If one animal becomes the target, the rest have a better chance of surviving. Ancient humans may have discovered the same strategy. Evidence from archaeological sites repeatedly shows that humans lived and traveled in cooperative groups. The exact size varied, but many anthropologists estimate bands of roughly 20 to 50 individuals. That mattered. A single person entering dangerous water is exposed. A coordinated group can scout, distract predators, help weaker members, and carry children or supplies together. Crossing wasn't just an individual challenge. It was a social one, but cooperation only solves part of the problem. because eventually, humans reached rivers that were simply too wide to wade through, too deep to walk, too dangerous to swim, and somehow, they crossed those too. The strongest evidence comes from a journey that should never have happened. Around 50,000 to 65,000 years ago, modern humans reached the ancient continent of Sol, a single landmass that included present-day Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania during the Ice Age. There was just one problem. Even when sea levels were at their lowest, Sol was never connected to mainland Asia. At least 70 to 100 kilometers of open water still separated the two. That means one simple fact cannot be avoided. Someone crossed it, not by accident, not clinging to driftwood after a storm. To establish a population large enough to survive, archaeologists estimate that dozens of people must have arrived over multiple journeys. A single family would not have been enough to maintain a healthy population. In 2017, archaeologist Alan Williams and his colleagues used computer models to test different migration scenarios. Their results suggested that reaching Sol required intentional voyages, with groups deliberately setting out across water rather than drifting by chance. This was one of the greatest technological achievements in human history, yet almost none of the boats survived. Wood, reeds, bark, and vines decay quickly. After 50,000 years, they leave almost no trace. Instead, archaeologists are forced to reconstruct the evidence backwards. If people reached an island they couldn't walk to, they must have built something that floated. But here's where it gets stranger. Crossing rivers may have been the first classroom for crossing oceans. A narrow stream teaches balance. A wider river teaches buoyancy. Each successful crossing builds confidence for the next. By the time humans faced open water, they may already have spent thousands of years experimenting with floating logs, bundled reeds, and simple rafts. You don't invent a seaworthy craft overnight. You improve it, one crossing at a time. Some clues survive outside Australia. At Nia Cave in Borneo and sites across islands Southeast Asia, archaeologists have found evidence of humans living on islands that also required water crossings during the late Pleistocene. These weren't isolated accidents. They point to a growing mastery of water. Still, rivers remain some of the greatest challenges. Unlike the sea, a river never stops moving. Its shape changes every season. A crossing that worked one year might disappear the next. That meant ancient humans had to read rivers almost like language. They watched the color of the water. Clear water often meant shallow sections. Brown, fast-moving water usually signaled greater depth and stronger currents. They watched birds. Large birds often rested on exposed sandbars hidden beneath the surface. Those sandbars could become stepping stones during the dry season. They watched animals. In Africa today, elephants, antelope, and buffalo repeatedly use the same crossing points year after year. Those locations usually combine gentle banks, firmer ground, and slower currents. Early humans almost certainly paid attention. Following animal trails often led directly to the safest places to cross. This wasn't luck. It was pattern recognition. The same cognitive ability you use today to recognize faces or navigate familiar streets helped your ancestors decode landscapes that changed every year. Except there was another problem. Not everyone could swim. Modern humans often assume swimming is natural. It isn't. While babies have reflexes that help them in water, swimming is largely a learned skill. Many cultures throughout history never developed strong swimming traditions. Others became extraordinary swimmers because survival demanded it. Anthropologist Ben Finney, who studied traditional Pacific navigation, argued that practical water skills were deeply connected to daily life rather than inherited instinct. The same was likely true for prehistoric people. Children probably learned gradually. They began in shallow pools, then slower streams, then larger rivers under the watch of experienced adults. By adulthood, crossing water wasn't a special event. It was simply another survival skill, much like tracking animals, or making stone tools, or recognizing poisonous plants. But rivers shaped more than movement. They shaped where humans lived. Some of the world's oldest long-term settlements appeared beside reliable rivers because water attracted fish, birds, edible plants, and large mammals. Sites like Ohalo II on the shores of the Sea of Galilee in present-day Israel, dating to around 23,000 years ago, reveal communities taking advantage of rich aquatic environments long before agriculture began. Rivers weren't just barriers, they were lifelines, and once humans learned how to cross them consistently, entire landscapes became connected. Ideas spread, stone tool design spread, genes spread, eventually, entire cultures spread. But there was one river crossing that changed the course of human history more than any other, and without it, your own family might never have existed. One of the most important river systems your ancestors ever encountered was the Nile. For hundreds of thousands of years, northeastern Africa acted as a crossroads between continents. Any group moving toward the Sinai Peninsula or the Levant had to navigate a landscape shaped by rivers, marshes, and seasonal floods. These weren't simple obstacles. They were filters. Only the groups that could understand the landscape moved through it. Evidence from Jebel Fire in the United Arab Emirates, dated to around 125,000 years ago, and fossils from Mislia Cave in Israel, dating to between 177,000 and 194,000 years ago, suggest that modern humans left Africa in multiple waves, not just one great migration. Some groups disappeared, others survived. Each journey depended on reading water, weather, and terrain with remarkable precision. Climate played a decisive role. During wetter periods, the Sahara Desert transformed. Grassland spread across regions that are now barren. Rivers and lakes appeared where there is only sand today. Researchers studying ancient lake sediments and pollen have shown that these green Sahara periods opened migration corridors across North Africa. But those corridors didn't stay open. As the climate shifted, rivers dried, lakes vanished, and familiar routes became impossible. Your ancestors couldn't rely on permanent roads. Every generation had to learn the landscape again. That ability, to adapt instead of repeat, may have been one of humanity's greatest strengths. And rivers revealed another kind of intelligence. They demanded planning. A successful crossing rarely began at the water's edge. Someone had to scout ahead. Someone had to judge the weather. Someone had to decide whether to wait until dawn, when visibility improved, or move before nightfall. Parents had to protect children. Hunters had to keep weapons dry. Food had to survive the journey. Every decision affected everyone else. Archaeologists call this behavioral modernity, the growing ability to plan ahead, cooperate in large groups, and solve problems that couldn't be fixed by strength alone. It's difficult to measure in fossils, but you can see its fingerprints. You see it in long-distance trade. You see it in carefully crafted stone tools. You see it in symbolic objects like the engraved ochre pieces from Blombos Cave in South Africa, dating to about 75,000 years ago. And you see it every time humans crossed a river that should have stopped them. The crossing itself wasn't the greatest achievement. The planning was. Perhaps the most remarkable part is how ordinary these moments must have felt. No one believed they were making history. A parent lifted a child onto their shoulders. A hunter tested the riverbed with a wooden spear. Someone watched the current. Someone waited for the signal. Then the group stepped into the water. They weren't trying to change the future. They were simply trying to reach the other side before sunset. Yet each successful crossing pushed humanity a little farther. Across valleys, across continents, eventually across oceans. Every language spoken today, every city ever built, every civilization that followed, all of them trace back to countless moments when small groups of humans stood before moving water and decided to keep going. Today, rivers rarely force you to stop. Concrete bridges, steel cables, and satellite navigation make crossing almost effortless. It's easy to forget that for most of human history, every river was a question. How deep is it? How fast is it? Is there another way? Can everyone make it? The answers were never written down. They lived in memory. They passed from one generation to the next through observation, experience, and trust. In many ways, your brain still carries echoes of that world. You instinctively look for the easiest path across unfamiliar ground. You judge moving water before stepping into it. You search for patterns, landmarks, and safe routes without consciously thinking about it. These habits feel ordinary because they are ancient. Long before humans built bridges, they built something less visible. A way of thinking that turned impossible barriers into solvable problems. The rivers themselves are still flowing, but the greatest crossing your ancestors ever made wasn't from one bank to another. It was from surviving the world to learning how to understand it.